The village of Quenya sat quietly between two rivers and a fading road that once carried kings. Life moved slowly there. Goats bleated in the morning, women pounded yam near noon, and the men played draughts under the old baobab tree when the sun dipped low. Among them lived a man named Omari, the village tailor, who stitched clothes with love and care but barely earned enough to feed his family. Omari's son, Jabari, was 17, strong and curious, but quiet, like a boy who had learned too early that the world did not bend for the poor. He spent most of his days helping his father patch worn-out trousers or delivering garments to families who barely nodded in return. Though poor, Jabari had one thing the rich often forgot: dignity. 1. Morning. News swept through the village like wildfire. The daughter of Chief Obatunde, the richest man in the region, was to be married. Her name was Afia, and her beauty was spoken of like a song. She walks like a gazelle and speaks like the first rain, the women gossiped while pounding cassava. The wedding was to be a grand affair, with guests coming from far-off cities and tribes. Omari, despite his poverty, was chosen to sew part of the bride's ceremonial garments. It was said Chief Obatunde only chose him because his great-grandmother once nursed the chief's father during a fever, long ago. A small favor returned after generations. Omari, old and tired, let Jabari deliver the garments to the chief's compound. "Go with respect," he said. "Speak only when spoken to, and don't look the chief's daughter in the eye." Jabari nodded, tied the package in cloth, and set out under the scorching sun. When he arrived at the grand gates of the Obatunde estate, he was nearly ignored. The guards looked at him with narrowed eyes. His clothes were faded, his slippers worn out. But Afia saw him. She stood near the gate with her maids, her gold-threaded wrapper shining under the sun. Her eyes were kind but tired in a way that made Jabari feel she was trapped in something she could not escape. She watched him closely, maybe longer than she should have, before the guards finally let him through. "Thank you," she whispered as he handed the garments. That was the first time their eyes met. The second time was chaos. The night before the wedding, the village was restless. Drums echoed from the chief's compound. Dancers came from other tribes. Meat was roasted on open fires. But suddenly, a scream tore through the noise. Then another, and another. Bandits. The chief's compound was under attack. Everyone scattered. Fire lit the sky. People ran. And amid the confusion, a horse-drawn cart tried to escape through the back path, carrying none other than Afia, bound and gagged. Jabari, who had only come to return a forgotten thread box to the tailor's corner, saw everything. He didn't think. He just ran. Faster than his legs should have allowed, he grabbed a stick, chased the cart into the forest, and with sheer desperation threw himself in front of the horses. They skidded, reared back, and the cart toppled sideways. The bandits ran. Jabari, with trembling hands, untied Afia, helped her up and checked for wounds. "Why did you do this?" she asked through tears. "You looked like you wanted to escape even before they came," Jabari replied softly. In that one moment, the world shifted. But saving her, that wasn't the unbelievable part. What came next would shake the village to its roots. The village woke with smoke in the sky and fear in its chest. The chief's compound, though guarded by men with long spears and proud shoulders, had been breached like it was made of grass. People whispered in doorways, their voices tight with fear and wonder. But no one had expected Jabari, the poor tailor's son, to be the one who brought the chief's daughter back alive. They found them just before sunrise, Afia limping slightly, holding Jabari's arm as they walked through the dusty road back to the village. Her wrapper was torn, her gold earrings missing, but her head was high. The villagers stared, some in silence, others in disbelief. Chief Obatunde stood at the compound's gate, flanked by his guards. His face was a mask, unreadable, carved from stone. When he saw his daughter, he rushed forward, pulling her into his arms with trembling hands. But as his eyes shifted to Jabari, something flickered. Pride, then discomfort, then a frown. "You," the chief said coldly. "What were you doing there?" "I saved her," Jabari answered, voice calm. "I followed the cart." The chief looked around, aware of the eyes on him. He offered a slow nod. "We are grateful." But that was it. No embrace, no reward, no gesture of thanks. Later that day, whispers twisted through the streets like smoke. Some said the attack had been planned, that Afia's groom, a wealthy merchant from another region, had many enemies. Others claimed it was Afia herself who had wanted to run, and the attack was only a convenient distraction. But most agreed on one thing: Jabari had done something no one else dared. Back at the tailor's home, Omari sat with his son, pride swimming behind his tired eyes. "I always told you dignity is stronger than gold," he said softly. But Jabari couldn't stop thinking about Afia. Not her beauty, but the way she had looked at him after the rescue, not with admiration, but with sorrow, as if she knew something he didn't. 3 days later, a message arrived. A servant from the chief's compound came at dusk carrying a sealed letter. He didn't speak, only handed the note and disappeared back into the evening. Jabari opened it, hands trembling. "Meet me at the old well where the baobab leans. Come before the moon reaches the top." Afia. He didn't ask questions. He just went. The old well was where stories were exchanged more than water. As Jabari arrived, he found her already waiting, dressed not like a bride, but like a villager. Plain cloth, no jewelry, hair tied simply. "I only have a few minutes," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Why call me?" Jabari asked. "Because you deserve the truth." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "That night, I didn't run. I was being taken by my father's men." Jabari's heart skipped. "What?" "He wanted me gone. Out of sight. Away from the wedding. The bandit attack was real, sis, but not on me. They were after someone else. My father took the moment to make me disappear." Jabari's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I refused the marriage," she said. "I told him I wouldn't marry. A man who buys wives with cows and lies." Silence wrapped around them like a second skin. "So he planned to fake your disappearance?" Jabari asked. "He said I had brought shame to the family, that my spirit had been poisoned by books, freedom, and foolishness. He thought the village would mourn me and move on. But I ruined that plan," Jabari murmured. She smiled faintly. "Yes, and now he cannot look weak, so he's doing what powerful men do." "What does that mean?" Afia looked up at him, her eyes steady. "He's trying to marry me off again, to someone worse." Jabari felt heat rise in his chest. "You can't let him. What choice do I have? I'm just a daughter. And you are just a tailor's son." It wasn't an insult. It was a fact, a painful, dry truth. But Jabari didn't flinch. "Then maybe we stop letting them decide who matters." The moon was high now. Time was short. Afia placed something in his hand, a small carved stone pendant. "My mother gave this to me before she died. She said if I ever met someone who saw my soul before my beauty, I should trust him. I think she meant you." Then she turned and walked into the dark. Jabari looked down at the pendant. That night, he didn't sleep. Because from that moment on, he knew one thing. He wasn't just a poor tailor's son anymore. He was the only one standing between a girl's freedom and a father's pride. The next morning, the sun rose like it always did, golden and bright as if nothing had changed. But Jabari knew better. Inside him, a storm had started, quiet and steady. He kept the pendant Afia had given him close, hidden beneath his shirt, like a secret prayer. At the tailor's shop, Omari noticed the difference in his son. "You are cutting thread like it's rope," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Jabari only forced a smile. He couldn't speak about what had happened. Not yet. Not until he understood what he needed to do. Word reached them by midday. Chief Obatunde had arranged a new engagement for Afia. Her next suitor was Senator Malu, a man more than twice her age, known for his wealth, political power, and cruelty. He already had 2 wives, both of whom lived more like shadows than women. The engagement ceremony was scheduled in 5 days. The village was buzzing with gossip, but no one dared speak openly. Who would question the chief? Who would risk offending the most powerful man in the region? Jabari couldn't breathe. He wanted to act, to do something. But what could he do? That night, he returned to the old well. Afia was there again, her face pale with frustration. "He didn't even ask me," she said. "Just made the decision and told the village crier to announce it." "Then run," Jabari said. "To where?" she snapped. "There is nowhere I could go that he wouldn't find me. I'm not just his daughter, I'm his property." Jabari looked at her and then looked down at his hands. "I don't have land, I don't have power, but maybe I have courage," she studied him. "You want to fight him?" "No, I want to shame him." She tilted her head, confused. Jabari leaned closer, his voice low. "What if, just before the ceremony, you chose someone else, publicly, loudly, in front of everyone?" Afia blinked. "They would never allow it." "That's the point. You choose someone they would never expect." Her eyes locked with his. "Me," he said quietly. Afia didn't laugh. She didn't scoff. She just stared. "I'm not asking for marriage," Jabari said. "I'm asking for a moment." A moment. That shows the village what he fears most, that you have a voice and you used it. Afia exhaled slowly. "If I do this, he will cast me out." "Maybe," Jabari said, "but he won't control you anymore." They spent the next 4 days preparing, not with weapons, but with words, timing, and bravery. Jabari spoke. With the local drummers, the market women, the young boys who ran errands across the village. Quietly, carefully. He planted seeds of curiosity, whispers of change. The morning of the engagement ceremony arrived. Chief Obatunde's compound was decorated with palm leaves, red and gold cloths, and musicians from the coast. The village elders sat in chairs brought from the city. Senator Malu arrived with his long convoy, dressed like a man who believed he could buy whatever he pleased. Afia was led into the center, dressed in royal blue, her face hidden behind a veil. As the chief stood to speak, his voice filled the air. "Today my daughter Afia becomes a wife, to a man of honor, wealth, and wisdom. We seal this union, not just for our family, but for the strength of this village." Polite applause followed. Then the drummers paused. Afia stepped forward and slowly lifted her veil. Her face was calm. Her voice didn't shake. "I cannot marry a man I do not love," she said, "and I cannot be silent anymore." Gasps echoed like thunder. Chief Obatunde stood, his face red with disbelief. "You shame me in front of my people, Afia?" Turned to the crowd. "I have already chosen someone with nothing except the courage to save me when no one else did." And from the edge of the gathering, Jabari stepped forward. The chief roared. "For you dare—" But the crowd stayed silent, watching, not laughing, not shouting, just watching, because something sacred had happened. A girl had chosen, a boy had stood, and truth had walked into a place built on silence. "Chief." Obatunde's face twisted with rage, but it was a rage bound by pride and fear. He couldn't lash out, not in front of the elders, not in front of the senator, and certainly not in front of a village now held hostage by its own curiosity. Jabari stood tall, dressed in his plain cloth shirt and sandals worn thin by years of hard paths. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough, a direct challenge to power, to tradition, to everything the chief had built his life upon. Senator Malu, seated beside the elders, narrowed his eyes. He adjusted. His long robe, leaned forward slightly and spoke for the first time. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, his voice oily. "You bring me here for an engagement and instead parade me through a theater of rebellion." The chief swallowed his pride. "I will handle this," he said coldly. He turned to his daughter. "Afia, step back. This boy has confused you. You are not of age to make such decisions." "I am 19, she cut in, "and my mother made her own choice when she was 16. Or did you forget that too?" A hush swept through the crowd. The mention of her late mother changed the mood instantly. A woman loved by the people, remembered for her kindness and fire. A woman whose death had dimmed the chief's house, but perhaps had also hardened his heart. Obatunde's jaw clenched. "You will come with me, now." "No," Afia said. And then something unexpected happened. Omari, Jabari's father, stepped forward. He moved slowly, his back bent with years of work, but his eyes were clear. He faced the chief and bowed gently. "With all respect, Obatunde, your daughter was nearly lost days ago. She survived because my son, a boy you never thought twice about, risked his life to save her. That act in many ways made him part of your family, even if only by fate." The chief remained silent. Omari continued, "You once said the spirit of the village matters more than wealth. Today, your daughter speaks with that spirit. Do not silence it just because it frightens you." People began murmuring, not in outrage but in agreement. Quiet, cautious agreement. Senator Malu stood clearly insulted. "I came here in good faith, I leave with none. If this is how you manage your house, chief, then your name is not worth the ink it's written in." And with that, he stormed off, his guards trailing behind. The chief watched him go, torn between humiliation and fury. He turned back to Afia. "You would throw away everything? A life of riches, security? All for this?" He pointed at Jabari like the boy was a piece of dirt. "Yes," she said, "because what he gave me, choice, courage, freedom, is worth more than gold." Tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. "And if you cast me out for this, I'll go, but at least I'll go standing." Silence. The chief stared at his daughter, then at Jabari, and then at the crowd. All eyes were on him, all waiting to see whether he would break or bend. He turned without another word and walked into his compound. No blessing, no acceptance, just silence. Afia took a breath, walked over to Jabari and took his hand. Not like lovers, but like partners in something bigger than love. Dignity. The villagers didn't cheer, they didn't dance, but they watched, and that was enough. Because watching meant witnessing, and witnessing meant change. Later that day, back at the Tailor's home, Jabari sat beside his father, his hand still wrapped around Afia's. Omari shook his head slowly. "I don't know whether to be proud or scared," he said. "You've challenged a man who never forgets." Jabari nodded. "But we reminded him of something he forgot, that people still have voices." Afia added, "And we used ours. Now we wait and see what the silence brings." The days that followed moved like slow fire, quiet on the outside but burning underneath. The chief had not spoken to Afia, not sent word, not summoned anyone. The village braced itself for a storm that never came, yet everyone felt it hanging, in the air like a knife suspended by a thread. Some expected Obatunde to retaliate, to punish Jabari, perhaps send guards in the night or cut off Omari's work. But nothing happened. The tailor's shop remained open. The chief's compound remained quiet. And Afia, she remained exactly where she wanted to be, in the humble home of a tailor and his son. It wasn't easy. Afia, raised in silk and ceremony, now learned to sweep floors, fetch water, and grind millet under the sun. Her hands blistered, her feet ached, but her spirit never wavered. The villagers watched with fascination. Some admired her, others gossiped about her fall from wealth, but no one could deny her strength, and Jabari, he worked harder than ever. Not just because they needed to eat, but because pride now lived in his shoulders. He wasn't rich, he wasn't royal, but he had purpose. And beside him stood a girl who had once belonged to a world that would never welcome him, but had chosen to walk away from it anyway. Still, tension brewed. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a messenger arrived. He wore the chief's colors and rode a chestnut horse that kicked dust into the air. He did not enter the tailor's home. He simply announced his message outside for all to hear. "Chief Obatunde invites the boy Jabari to a private council at dawn tomorrow. Refusal will be noted." Then he turned and rode off, leaving a stunned silence behind. Omari stood frozen. Afia reached for Jabari's hand. "You don't have to go," she said quickly. "He could trap you, humiliate you." Jabari's voice was calm. "If I don't go, I lose more than pride. I lose the right to be heard." Omari nodded slowly. "Then go as my son, not as a beggar." That night, Omari gave Jabari his oldest robe, faded but clean. He oiled his son's hair, brushed the dust from his sandals, and said a quiet prayer that didn't ask for safety, but for strength. At dawn, Jabari stood before the chief once more. Only this time, there were no guards with spears, no elders, sitting on decorated stools. Just Obatunde seated under a tree chewing slowly on a kola nut. "You came," he said without looking up. "I did." The chief studied him for a long time. "You've caused me shame. My name trembled in the mouths of other men because of you." "I didn't set out to shame you," Jabari replied, "only to protect her and let her speak." Obatunde's jaw tightened. "You think the world works like that? That people can speak and power will listen? I think silence is the only thing that gives power its fangs." The chief leaned forward. "You love her?" Jabari didn't hesitate. "I respect her, enough to listen when no one else would." Obatunde was silent for a while. Then, with a heavy sigh, he said, "When her mother died, something inside me hardened. I began treating her like a possession, not a person. And when she refused the first marriage, I feared she would ruin everything. I built—" Jabari stood still, unsure where this was going. "I don't forgive you," the chief said, standing. "And I don't bless this, whatever it is." Jabari nodded. "I didn't expect you to." But Obatunde added, "I won't stop it either. You've already planted something in this village that won't be uprooted, an idea. That dignity can grow even in poor soil." He stepped closer, eyes hard. "Make her suffer and I will end you. Do you understand?" "I understand." Then the chief turned and walked away, leaving Jabari alone under the tree, heart pounding. It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was freedom. When he returned, Afia met him at the edge of the village. She didn't need to ask. What had happened? She saw it in his eyes. "So, we build now?" she asked. Jabari nodded. "We build." And as they walked back hand in hand, people didn't look at them as a poor boy and a disgraced daughter anymore. They saw something else, something stronger. Weeks turned into months, and what began as a scandal slowly reshaped into something that no one had expected: respect. The Tailor's small home, once quiet and shadowed by poverty, now echoed with laughter, late-night sewing, and the rhythm of a life rebuilt. Afia had transformed not just the house, but the village's idea of what strength looked like. She organized a small learning circle for girls under the baobab tree, teaching them not only to read and write, but also to speak up. Some mocked her at first, calling her the fallen bride, but slowly that name became something else, a symbol. Jabari worked harder than ever. Orders for clothing doubled, not because his needle had changed, but because his name had. People brought business not just for his stitching, but for what he now represented: integrity, bravery, and quiet rebellion. Even Chief Obatunde, though he never spoke publicly of it, began sending guards with torn uniforms to be mended, always. Through her servant, a silent truce had formed. There was no warmth, no reconciliation, but there was peace. One afternoon, Afia returned from the river with a clay pot balanced on her head, her hands dusty from washing yam. She looked tired, but when she saw Jabari outside fixing the shed, she smiled like the sun had risen twice that day. He looked up at her, wiped sweat from his brow, and said, "You've become a villager." She laughed. "And you've become a man who speaks like an elder." "Maybe we're both changing," he said. "Maybe we needed to." That night they sat under the stars. Omari dozed nearby, and the crickets hummed like they were telling secrets. Afia rested her head on Jabari's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't followed that cart? If you had just stayed home that night?" "I do," he said honestly. "And I always come to the same answer." "What?" "I would have still found you somehow." She didn't reply, just squeezed his hand tighter. Some time later, a knock came at their door. It was the village messenger. In his hand, a scroll sealed with red wax, the official stamp of the council of elders. He handed it to Jabari and said only, "The chief has spoken." Jabari opened it slowly. It read, "By voice of the council and tradition of Quenya, the union between Jabari, son of Omari, and Afia, daughter of Obatunde, is recognized. Let the path they chose be remembered, not for its rebellion, but for its honesty. Let the children of this village know a name does not make a man and wealth does not make a wife, but courage Courage is the seed of legacy. Tears welled in Omari's eyes. He placed his hand on his son's shoulder, and for a long moment, no one said anything. There were no drums that night, no celebration. But in the morning, when Jabari and Afia walked through the village to the market together, something strange happened. People bowed their heads, not out of fear, but out of respect, and in the heart of Quenya, once divided by name. Class and silence, a new story had taken root, one that would be told for generations, not just about a poor tailor's son who saved a rich bride, but about what happened next. He didn't win a title. He didn't earn riches. He earned something, far greater, a voice, a partner, and a place where love and courage were finally allowed to grow.